what we're going to do is at 3 points during the session, I'm going to announce 3 different code words that are automatically generated by an online tool, believe it or not. They might seem a little strange, but that's because they're generated by that computer process. We'll wait initially for about 10 minutes before I give you the first one. That way, anybody that's joining us late will be able to have that first number. And then about a half hour after that, we'll give you the second one, and towards the end, the third one. What you're going to do is you're going to write those code words down, and then when you apply for your credit to the certification unit, you're going to include those 3 code words on that form. It's the document you're going to send for the credit is called the Individual Continuing Education Agreement. It's on our website, and there's a link to it on the GovConnect notice that went out on Tuesday morning. But if you didn't get the GovConnect notice for whatever reason, just go to our website, go to the certification section, and there's a bunch of links. And what you're looking for is the Word document for the Individual Continuing Education Agreement. That would be the same form that you would fill out, let's say, if you go to Pennsylvania and you attend some kind of a seminar there, but it hasn't been pre-approved by us for any credits, but you say to yourself, gee, I think I could get some credits for this. Let me ask the state. You would fill that form out and give it to us, and then our certification unit would evaluate it. It's the same form for this. We've already pre-approved it, though. If you have any questions about that, you can always contact Dan Kaminsky or me after the session's over. So that's all I have for now. We've been running about an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 20 minutes for the sessions, depending on the questions, just so everybody knows. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So we'll get started here. A couple things I want to just go over again. I know Chris kind of mentioned it. Again, we cannot hear your questions. We have everybody basically muted. So we do ask that when you do have questions, there is a chat function in the panel that came up for the webinar. Please type your questions in there. We will pause at certain points during the presentation to answer those questions. So, we'll have more than ample opportunity to answer them. And at the very end, too, we will stay on to the very end until everybody's question is answered. So, again, just ask your questions, type them in the panel, and we will get to them at various points as we go through the webinar. So to get started real quick, I did have a PowerPoint running there. I hope that everybody took a quick glance at it. But basically what we're going to do is these areas that you see right now in the webinar, these are the 5 areas that we're going to pretty much cover today. We're going to talk about how to log into the new FDS system. We're going to talk about how to create and maintain your LGO roster, how an LGO would set up an account, and mainly since we have the majority of participants on the call are municipal clerks, I do refer to the municipal clerks mostly, so I understand that you have to file as well too. So we'll go through that whole setup. We'll talk about what happens when an LGO files an FDS, what areas of the system that it updates, and we'll also look at the public search site as well too, where people will be able to actually go out and do these FDSs once they're filed. As I go through, like I said, with today's session, there will be some terms that I use for acronyms, 3-letter acronyms, just so everybody's aware and what they are. If I refer to LGS, that stands for Local Government Services, which is the DCA. And LGE will refer to the local government entity, which is normally the municipalities, counties, colleges, GIFs, so on and so forth. LGO will be the local government official, okay, who's responsible for filing, obviously, an FDS, which is a financial disclosure statement. So as we go through today, I use those 3-letter acronyms, so if everybody's not familiar with them, I just wanted to let everybody know exactly what they mean. So that being said, let's jump out of here, out of my PowerPoint. Let's go over here to my login screen, and I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. Bear with me here. There we go. Okay, so everybody should now see my login screen. Just to make sure that everybody can hear me, if a few people, and I'll just check, can just say yes, they can see the screen, they can hear me fine, just type in the chat section yes, just so I can make sure before we actually get going through our whole presentation. Yep, good, okay, that's good, nobody else has to answer, thank you. Okay, that's working, so everything's working. So, okay, so let's get started here. So what you're looking at right now is you're looking at the login screen. This login screen is going to be the same login screen both the LGS uses, the LGE folks, even the LGOs will come here. Everybody will come to the same website. We are working today in our test site. The live system isn't up yet, and we'll talk about that later in the webinar, when we anticipate that being live and so on and so forth, and some dates and all that. But now today we're going to be working in the test system. And when we come here, what's going to happen is over the next couple of weeks, just prior to going live, the DCA will be communicating with you with your usernames and your temporary passwords in order to log into the system. Those usernames they're grabbing, which ultimately will be your email address. Those usernames are coming from the GovConnect site, so the DCA is working on just filtering through those lists, and that information will be sent to you within the next, I would say, 7 to 10 days, just prior to the system going live. Once you get that information, you'll utilize that to log into the system, and we're going to do that in a few minutes here. But before I do that, just a couple of things I want to point out here on the screen, especially in the lower section down below here where it says System Requirements. Just to utilize the system, it is a web-based, cloud-based system, so as long as you have a computer and internet access, you'll be able to access the system. We do ask from a hardware standpoint, you can utilize a Windows PC, you can use an Apple Mac. I've actually logged into the system through my iPad, so these are the various devices that you can actually access the system. From a browser standpoint, the system is browser independent. So whether you use Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, you'll be able to utilize the system. So it's browser independent. There are areas of the system that we might have some pop-ups come up. So we ask that you add the URL to your trusted pop-up sites, or you just turn off pop-up blocker altogether. So just be aware, and I'll show you some of those areas as we go through where those pop-ups will come up. We do ask that because it's some of these pop-ups and some of these reports that we do display within the system, they do come up in a PDF format. So we ask that you either have Adobe Reader installed on that device, or you have some other type of compatible PDF viewer installed on your device so you can actually view those documents when they come up. And then the last thing is from a resolution standpoint, we kind of have a minimum resolution that we say works best with the application. Obviously, if you use a higher resolution, that's even better. But at a minimum, we ask that that's the minimum resolution that you actually use when you are accessing the system. One last thing before I actually log into the system, and I know it comes up a lot, especially when we move into next year and people haven't used the system in a while, is what was my password? I forgot my password. So the one thing I want to point out right on the login screen here is we do have a link that says forgot password. If at any point in time you do forget your password, you can actually come in here, put in your email address. Okay, so I'm going to put, I'll put an email address in here, and then you can click on Get Password. If that email address or that username is a valid username within the system, that password will be emailed to you. If it isn't, what you'll see, and you'll see it on the screen here, you got a message in red that says the given email ID is not registered in the system. So if you try to get your password and you put in the wrong email address or username that we utilize in the system, it's going to give you that message in red. But if I come back here and I put in a valid name and I click on Get Password, what I should then see right here is I should see a message that says password has been emailed to that email address, right? So if you get that message, then you know that that password was or that username was valid, and check your email. You should be getting an email very shortly with that password in it. So just wanted to point that out, that in case you do forget your password, at any point in time, you can come in here and you can click on that Forget Password link. So I'm going to log into the system. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log in as an LGE, mainly like a municipal clerk, and we're going to talk about roster, how to create a roster, how to maintain a roster. I will be using two towns today as part of my demo. I utilize Edison Township as one of them. It just so happens that's my hometown, so I use that town. And one of the other ones I will use is South Brunswick. So I use those two towns for demo purposes today. So let me log into the system first. So I'm going to be logging in as an LGE into Edison Township. Okay, and when I click on the login button, it's going to take me to my home screen of the FDS system. So a couple things I want to point out first before we get to the little icons in the middle of the screen here. Basically what we have is in the upper right-hand corner, what you'll see here is you'll see your name when you first log into the system. Cheryl happens to be the clerk here in Edison Township, so her name is being displayed there. Right below that, you should see the local government entity name. In this case, it's Edison Township, County of Middlesex. Okay, so you should see your name and you should see your entity listed right there. Just below that, you have a logout button, right? So since this is a web-based system, there are several ways you can log out of the system. You can click on that logout button, and that will log you out of the system. You can click on the X to close the browser up in the upper right-hand corner, or if your browser has a different way to close the browser, you can close it that way. That will log you out of the system. And then the last way you can be forced to log out of the system is that if you have been logged into the system and haven't used the system for a period of time, there's been no activity, for security reasons, the system's going to log you out of the system automatically. Okay, so that's another way that you can actually be logged out of the system. You'll also see on this home screen here, you'll see a status bar. It'll tell you what the current submission year is. We're in year 2014. Next year, when we move into 2015, Chris and his staff will actually control when the year rolls over from 2014 to 2015, and that information will be communicated to you. At that point in time, once you see submission year 2015, that means your LGOs can go in and start filing their new FDSs, and you can actually go in and update and maintain your roster for that year, for the 2015 year. You'll also see some stats here to let you know how many LGOs are registered in the system, and out of those LGOs, how many have filed their FDSs, right? So it gives you a quick status when you first log into the system. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things is when you get your username and password from the DTA, the password is going to be a temporary password. So the first thing that we're going to ask you to do is when you first log into the system is go in and change that password. Give yourself a user-friendly password that you can that you'll utilize for using the system. And the way you'll do that is the third icon over to the right here where it says Edit Local Government Entity Profile. If you click on that link, what it's going to do is take you into the profile for your entity. Now, there's certain things that you'll be able to change in here and update. I would, tell you to review the information that's on this screen, update any of the information that needs to be updated. But really, what I am asking you to do is in the lower section down here, where you see the last two fields say password and confirm password, this is where you should go in and you should put in the new password. So what you'll need to do is clear out these fields. So just click on the fields, clear out the password and the confirm password that's listed there, and now you'll need to enter your new password. Now we do list right below the password line. There is, you have to use, when you're entering your password, between 8 and 16 characters. You need to contain at least one letter and one number in your password. Okay, so remember that. But if you go in and try to put a password in, right, let me just show you. Let's say I just put in a 4-digit password, and I go to hit save. The system's going to give me a warning, and it's going to tell me that we have, oh, hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Give me 1 second. Try that again. Okay. Hold on, why am I doing this? Give me 1 second on something's not, application is paused. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So what we have here is you'll get a message that says password must be between 8 and 16 characters in length and contain at least one letter and one number. So, okay, I'll come back, I'll correct it, I'll put in based on the guidelines, my new password. And then when I'm done, I'm going to click save. And once that's saved, if that operation has saved successfully in the system, what you'll get up at the top of the screen in green is a message that lets you know that operation saved successfully. So one of the things I want to point out is as we do different things within the system, if those operations are done successfully, we always will put a message at the top and the bottom of the screen in green letting you know that that operation has been successful. But let's say I did something that wasn't successful. Then what we do is we display a message in red, okay, that lets you know that operation wasn't successful, and we usually tell you the reason why it wasn't successful, okay? In this case, the representative phone number is invalid. That's because I dropped a 0 off the last 4 digits. If I put my 0 back and I click on save, then I get my message in green that the operation was successful. So as you're working throughout the system, anything that you do that's been updated correctly, you'll get that message in green, right? So again, the first thing to do, come in, change your password, come up with a user-friendly password that you'll remember, and then you'll be all set. So at this point, I'm going to click on the home button in the upper left-hand corner, take us back out to our home screen. And then two other icons that you see in the home screen is, I'll start to the middle one, which is the reports. We'll talk about reports a little bit later. We are still developing some of the reports for the system, but you can go in there and run any reports that have been assigned to the system. But really the focus of today is going to be this Manage LGO roster. This is where you're going to go in and come in and create your roster, manage your roster, and go from there. Now, I know in the past what was different with the system from last year was, or those rosters generally used to get updated towards the end, okay? And here now with this system, what we're going to do is the rosters need to actually be created in the beginning before your LGOs can actually file their FDS. If that LGO does not appear on the roster, they're not going to be able to file their FDS. So it's going to be imperative that you actually get your roster set up as quickly as possible and you get all your LGOs on the roster. Now, as we go throughout the course of the year, you have new LGOs that get appointed to committees and so on and so forth. That's fine. You can always come back in. You can always update and maintain your roster at any point in time. So before I actually get into actually adding an LGO, I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to have Chris give out the first code word for the credits, and then we'll continue on.
All right, everybody. First code word is gold. G-O-L-D, gold, as in the color, or the bars, gold bars. G-O-L-D, gold. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Okay, so basically now what we have is we've come into this screen here, okay, and this is the LGO roster screen. Now I've been using this obviously Edison Township over the last several days as my test township, right? So we can see at the bottom here that I already have a roster built, okay? The first time you come into this screen, there'll be, nothing on this roster. And what you'll end up doing is clicking on the Add LGO. We'll get to that in a few seconds. But I just want to show you a couple of things once your roster is built within this screen. There's going to be some towns that their roster is only going to be maybe 30, 40 LGOs, okay, which is very manageable. And you're going to have other municipalities, the larger cities, that can literally have hundreds of LGOs on their roster. And to quickly find a particular LGO on your roster, you can actually come up here and search by their first or last name, okay? So if I came in here and I wanted to search for anybody with the last name Smith, okay, I typed Smith in, I could search, and then we would see everybody displayed with the word or last name Smith, okay? But I don't have to type out their full last name. I could just type a portion of their last name. So if I just type the letter S, anybody's last name that starts with S is going to come up. So we'll see Smith, we'll see my name come up, Mark Zemple, both of them come up. So as we go through the system, right, if I just type one of the letters, if I do W, we see two people come up. We see Elizabeth White come up, and we see Michael Williams come up, right? So again, you can either search by the last name or you can search by the first name, right? So if I just typed in, let's say, M, right? Everybody whose first name starts with M comes up. So my name came up, and also Michael Williams came up as well, too. So several different ways you can actually pull up and search your roster. Now, down below, once your search results come up, this is what we call our search grid down below, okay? And basically, each column there that you see, you can sort those columns just by clicking on the column heading. So let's say I wanted to sort the first name column in alphabetical order. Well, if I click on the first name heading, okay, the first click is going to sort that column in ascending order. If I click it a second time, it'll put it in descending order, right? So once your search grid comes up, if you ever want to sort any of your columns, like I want to sort everybody that's on a particular board or agency, I can just click on that, and you'll see that there's all my administrations came up, my administrator, my governing bodies, planning and zoning, so on and so forth, right, in alphabetical order. If I click it again, it'll put it in descending order, right? So again, any of these columns you can just click on, and you can actually sort them ascending and descending. So again, I just wanted to show you the search functionality and the sort functionality here on this screen. So let's go in now and let's go add an LGO to the system, right? So the way we would do that, let's say you have you're creating a roster. We have a new person we need to add to the roster. I'm going to click on Add LGO, okay? And what this is going to do is this is going to come up with a screen and we're going to start the process at the very top in the first section. Now, the first three, or the first two fields that we're going to utilize here is going to be the first name and the last name of that LGO. So I'm going to type, let's see, my person today, there we go, is going to be James Walker. That's my person I'm using today. Now, I will caution you that the first name, the last name, and then once I hit save, the system is going to generate a unique PIN number for James Walker. Those three pieces of information are what you're going to need to relate to the LGO so they can set up their account in the system. And I'll get to that in a little bit when we go to the LGO setup, or how the LGO actually creates their account in the system. But one thing I want to caution you is that, you know, my recommendation is that for first name, you use their legal first name. You know, James Walker might go by Jim Walker, okay? But what happens is that if he goes to register and he uses Jim instead of James, or vice versa, it's not going to be a match, okay? It's going to be a mismatch. It's not going to let him actually register. The other reason why I say to use the legal first name is that when people go out eventually on the public search site, they might be searching by that legal name as well, too. So, again, I recommend that you use that legal first name. But if somebody really, you know, wants to go by their nickname or short name or whatever, I mean, by all means, you can still use that. Our recommendation is that you use their full legal name. The second field here, now these two fields are required. They have a red asterisk, which they are required fields. But we also have the middle name field, which isn't a required field. If you have their middle name or middle initial, you can definitely enter it in here. But let's say you had two James Walkers that work for Edison Township. Well, you might want to distinguish them if they have different middle names or different middle initials, right? So when you look at your roster, you know who is who, okay? But once you enter that first name and that last name into the system,
Hey, Mark?
yes.
I hate to interrupt because you're on a roll. I just got an email from upstairs in IT that they're signed in, and they're saying they're seeing. Hold on. He's not sure if everyone that's watching has this problem, but George upstairs is only seeing the screen from when you tried to change your password.
Oh, okay. Hold
Is
on.
anybody having problems seeing something different? If so, can somebody type a message to Mark?
Hold on. Let me go through the messages. Sorry here. Hold on. Question.
I'm seeing the screen that you're working on, but I don't know if everybody else is seeing the same thing.
Okay. Hold on. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. So what screen did we get caught up on? Did they say, Chris? I'm sorry. And I'll go back.
Yeah,
that's fine.
George indicated at 10:21 that he was only seeing the screen from when you tried to change your password.
Okay.
I no longer see that, and I'm just wondering if everybody else is seeing what you're seeing. Maybe if you draw a circle.
Yeah. Okay.
Just ask somebody if everybody sees the circle being drawn.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's do that. Let's go here. Let's draw the circle. Let's do pen color. Let's do red.
So did anybody not see that? If you saw it, you don't have to type. But if you didn't see it, just shoot a quick message to Mark.
Okay. Some people says now I can see the circle.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I apologize for that. I must have been, when I was clicking, I might have hit something, didn't realize it. Okay. So that being said, let me do this then. Let me go back, because then I know we missed a couple of steps here. So let's go back. I'm going to go back to the home screen. Okay. Okay. So let's go back to. Okay. So we were at the change password, which was in the edit profile. So that's where we kind of lost everybody before. I'm going to go back out to the home screen. Sorry about that. And we'll go back to the manage LGO roster. Okay. And I'm going to just make sure. Okay. I can actually, one of the panels, I can actually see where I'm at. Okay. So with the LGO roster, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that here is my roster down below, okay? And basically, these are all the people that are on my roster. What I was talking about earlier is I can do a search up at the top here, right, by, last name, okay? So I can type in Smith, and I can hit search, and anybody in my roster with the last name Smith will be displayed, right? I only have one person with the last name Smith, okay? Or if I don't want to do it by the last name, I want to know everybody that has a last name that starts with S, and I just put S for last name and hit search, then everybody whose last name starts with S comes up, right? So you see Smith and Zempel come up there. And I could do the same thing with the first name as well, too, right? If I put in M in first name, everybody whose first name starts with M comes up, so Mark and Michael, okay? So you can actually use those two fields right there to actually search your roster quickly if you're looking for a specific person. And then, as I mentioned, with your search grid, which you have here with all your names on it, any of these columns you can sort just by clicking on the column heading, right? So if you look at my first name column, the first click puts it in ascending order. If I click it again, it puts it in descending order, right? So again, any of these columns, ascending, descending, just by clicking on the column heading. So again, when you have your search grid, you can actually pull them up. And then the other thing is you can actually change how many results you see per page. Our default is going to be 25, but if you want to increase that to 50, you can actually just change that. Now, I don't have more than 25 right now, but you can actually change your page size right there. So again, that's how you would actually go in, search, and sort your search results, your roster. Now, down at the bottom was where we were adding our LGO before, right? So I'm going to click on Add LGO right here. Okay. And up in the top section, this is where we actually start the registration or the setup of the roster for this person. So here, as I was talking about for first name, I'm going to put James. Last name is Walker. And I mentioned exactly why to use the first name, the legal first name, and all that. And then the middle name can go here if you have it. But once I click on Save, what we're going to see here is a PIN number created for James Walker. Okay? So let me hit on Save. And basically what you'll see right now is you'll see right here, you'll see a PIN number was created. So 40706. So let me write that down, 40706. Now, with the PIN number and the first and last name, the LGO is going to need that information to register within the system. And I'll show you in a few minutes how they're going to actually go in and register with that information. But it's going to be up to you to send that information to the LGO. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. We give you an option at the bottom of the screen once I enter everything in to actually print out the screen, okay, with all their information on it, and you can actually, hand it to them. Or some people want to email it. You can email the information to them. So, but what you'll need to do is, in order for them to register, they're going to need those three pieces of information. They're going to need the first name, the last name, and the PIN number. Let's talk about PIN number for a minute. The PIN number is going to be unique for this person or for this LGO only within Edison Township. If James Walker is part of another organization, and we're going to actually add him to South Brunswick Township in a few minutes, he will get a different PIN number from that organization. Now, when he goes to register, he can actually link up all his PIN numbers with one account. Okay, he doesn't have to have multiple accounts in the system. He can have one account, and he can have all his PIN numbers linked together. That's what actually ties all the different positions he has and all the different entities together in one shot. So again, as we go through that, just remember that he will get, or he or she will get different PIN numbers from different organizations. But no matter how many positions he or she holds within your entity, that PIN number will stay the same. So, we're going to give James 2 positions in Edison Township. He's not going to get 2 separate PIN numbers from Edison. He's only going to get 1, but that 1 is going to be attached to both of those positions. Okay, so we've got him started. We've entered his first name, his last name. We've clicked on Save. We've generated, the system has generated a PIN number. Now we're going to go to the next section here, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually add the position within Edison Township that he has, right? So here in Edison Township, we're going to say he has 2 positions. One is he's an elected official, right? He happens to be a council person, right? So I'm going to say he's part of the governing body. That's the board of the agency that he's on. I'm going to say he's a council person. And then we also give you the ability, if you want to, put in the term effective date for this position for James Walker. It's not a required field. You don't have to enter it in. But if you do enter it in, that information will appear on his FDS under his position. So again, if you have it readily available and you can enter it in, by all means, put the information in there. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. It's not a required field. You can just, go by it, and, if you have to, I think later on you can actually update that information. So once I add his position information here, If you look down in the last section where it says list of positions held, there's nothing listed right there. It says no positions held. But once I hit save here, now what's going to happen is that position is now going to be added to the bottom of the screen for James, and you'll see that it's listed there now as an elected official in the governing body. He's now a council person. Now, we've made it easy that if you're adding multiple positions for James in the system, all I need to do is we're still on James, right? He's still listed up here. I just need to come down and I need to just add him to another, another position. So here I'm going to say he's a member of the Planning and Zoning Board. Okay. Position held, I'm just going to say he's a member. I'm not going to put any term information in. I'm going to click on Save, and now what happened is that position is now added down below. Okay? So again, no matter how many positions that person has within your organization in which they're required to file an FDS, you can add all those positions down, as you're going through and setting everybody up. Let's say you forgot a position, okay, when you're putting the information in. You can always come back and edit James Walker and add additional positions later on. Or, it happens quite often, somebody gets appointed to another committee, board position, sometime through the year. You can always come back and update that roster and add that new position at any point in time. But at this point, once I have all my positions in, now, like I said earlier, I can click on the print button at the bottom of the screen, okay? And I can you can print out this page and you can hand it to James Walker and say, here is your information, so you can now go register as an LGO and file your FDS, okay? So that's how we go through and, we do that printout. If I go back out to my roster, okay, we'll see that James Walker is now listed on the roster. And like I said, if we need to edit anything with James, I can just click on the edit button all the way to the right, okay? And now what will happen is I can go in and add another position. Or let's say he really wasn't a member of the planning board, I can delete that position, okay? So again, this is where I'd actually update and maintain that. Now, up at the top, you'll see a couple of other buttons here. You'll see a delete button and an add new LGO. The delete button will actually delete. If I click on delete, it'll actually delete James off my roster. With a caveat, if James has already filed an FDS, this delete button will not be there, okay? You can't delete somebody who's already filed an FDS. But let's say as you were creating your roster, you put on James on the roster by accident, he really didn't need to be on there, you can actually delete him as long as that person has not filed an FDS. Also, when I'm working in the screen, if I want to add a new LGO to my roster, I can just click on Add New LGO, and that'll take me in, it'll clear all the information out, and now I'll be able to add my new LGO into the system at that point in time. So again, I can work on the screen building my roster without having to get out. I can just keep going, person after person after person until my roster is built. Once I'm done adding everybody in, I can always go back out to the screen out here, and I can just make sure that everybody's listed out there on that screen, okay? A couple other things I want to point out. You'll notice that for my James Walker person, okay, here's the PIN number. Okay, you'll see the PIN number is identical, right? So for all positions, that PIN number is going to be the same. You'll also notice to the right of that, this column says FDS filed. Okay, right now it says no because James hasn't filed his FDS. As soon as an LGO files the FDS, okay, the system, your roster will be updated automatically. Okay, this will go from a no to yes. And we'll see that a little bit later on when I actually file this FDS for James. So I'm going to go out to the home screen. I'm going to pause here for a couple seconds. I'm going to go through the questions. I'm going to answer some questions. And let's see what we got here. So I just got to go through the ones where I apologize. I didn't see these because my question screen gets hidden when I'm going through my presentation. So I just got to get rid of some of these here. Okay, so what do we got here? Having trouble hearing. Can I hear? Screen is frozen. Just bear with me 1 second here. Chris, I don't know. Do you want to give maybe the other keyword at this point, or?
Sure, we'll do. Okay, everybody. The second code word for your 1 hour contact hour is quail. Q-U-A-I-L. Quail. Q-U-A-I-L.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me go to the bottom here. Okay. Okay, so it says, why didn't the login name appear when you added James Walker? Because the LGO is going to create their own login name, okay? So when they actually register in the system, they're actually going to create their own login name, which is going to be their email address. Once they do that, then that column will be updated, okay? So you don't physically capture or obtain their email address. It's when they register, and what they want to use to register with is the username that they're going to utilize. So that column will be updated once they actually register within the system. It says, do we need to have the email address before we can add them? No. Again, nope, you don't need that. Or do they provide that once they log in with their PIN? Again, they'll provide that once they log in with their PIN and they register. And we're going to do that as the next step. You're going to see how to register as an LGO. It says, must all LGOs have the system requirements listed in order to file an FDES? Must all LGOs have the system requirements listed? I'm not really sure, Melissa. I know you sent that message. If you kind of maybe rephrase that, I apologize. I just don't understand the question there. Okay, so let's go here. Bear with me here. I'm just kind of going through. Okay, people see. Okay, and I'm just going to double check. If anybody is still having a problem seeing the screen, you know, please send a message now. Because I'm not, I saw some mixed messages here. Some people saying yes, some people saying no. So I just want to make sure that everybody's still seeing the screen. So if you're still having a problem, please send me a message. Okay. Okay, Linda. Okay, so can you tell me? I got your. So can you tell me what you're not seeing or what issue you're having, if you don't mind? Just type that back if you don't mind. And I'm just trying to clear out some of these questions here. So. Sorry. Oh, okay. Okay, let's see here. I have another question that came up here. Oh, computer system. Okay, so Melissa had said the question, I wasn't sure. She had said about computer system requirements. Melissa, those computer system requirements will be listed on that login page for the LGO as well too. So you could just refer them to that to let them, you know, see them. But like I said, that login page is going to be for everybody. That same login page is utilized by you, the LGO, the LGS. Everybody gets into the system through the same login page. So those system requirements will be listed there for the LGOs as well too. Okay, I did get a message from somebody that says they were having a problem. What they ended up doing was just logging out and logging back in, and then they were fine seeing everything. So again, if Linda, you're still having a problem, maybe you can just kind of log out and log back in, and then you know, we'll see if that solves the problem. But I did see somebody else that they had a similar problem where they just logged out and logged back in, and everything was good. It says, is only one person authorized to manage the roster? Yes. Right now, for this year, we're only going to have one username and one password sent to each entity, and that username and password will be utilized to manage the roster. Like I said, when you go to change your password, I know some towns, not the clerks, handle that process. They usually give it to an assistant, maybe the deputy clerk or somebody else. You can change the password to whatever you want. So if you don't want to give your normal password that you use for other things, you guys can just make up a, another, password that you both can share. That's fine. And then after that roster has been done and created, if you want to go back and change that password again, you have that option. You can always go back and change that password as many times as you want. But yeah, for this year, there's only going to be one username and password to manage that. We're going to look, for subsequent years if there's going to be the ability to actually have multiple people have username and passwords in order to manage those rosters. But for this year, it's just going to be just one. Okay, good question here, because this comes up almost every session. If mayor asks us to fill out their LGL, should we? Chris, I'll give that one to you.
it's really a matter for your own determination. Number one, remember that we've been stressing for a couple years now from the division's perspective that the statute requires your LGOs to file these. It does not require you to file them on behalf of those people. The burden is on them to file. If you have 400 LGOs on your roster, certainly you're not going to be able to do anybody's roster. You're not going to be able to do 400 FDSs. That's just not going to work for anybody. Different ways to handle that scenario. One would be is simply to advise the mayor and council member that they need to do that because it contains information that's their information. But number two, and perhaps maybe the better argument to make would be this. If you fill somebody's FDS out for them, if you fill out Mayor so-and-so's FDS, and let's say Mayor so-and-so forgets to give you certain key information that should be on that form, like the beach house in Long Beach Island. So you don't have that information, and you're filling out this form, and let's say there's an ethics complaint against the mayor down the road. What do you think your mayor is going to say as part of the defense to the local finance board? I didn't fill out my FDS, the clerk did. You need to be really cautious about that kind of stuff. It's a personal decision you have to make. There's nothing that says you can't fill out another person's FDS. And quite frankly, I filled out my father's last year. He's a borough councilman somewhere. He filled it out in pen, and then I logged on and I did the Adobe form for him. It took me all 2 minutes to do, so it didn't take a lot of my time. But he's my father, so I was willing to bear that risk. Whether you're willing to bear the risk of being dragged into some sort of an ethics complaint issue because something's missing from the form or not, or it's not accurate, whatever, it's up to you. It's just a word of caution from us here.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I know that question usually comes up like every session, so I just wanted Chris to kind of explain what the stance is, not, him and the VCA. Okay, next question. It says, I am the executive director at a local housing authority. Will I receive a separate login email from DCA, GovConnect, for me to manage my own roster, or will I have to provide my information for myself and my authority commissioners to the local municipal clerk? As of right now, any local authority, MUAs or whatever, will go through the municipal clerk, okay? So you'll have to give that information over to the municipal clerk. They'll be responsible for managing that roster for those local authorities. Next question, Mark, did you say there is one user and password per town? Yes, only one user per town to manage the roster for right now for this year. So just to reiterate that. Next question, I have 4 to 5 people who do not have computers, so not to use computers. Is there still a way for them to complete a paper roster? I do not want to be responsible for submitting FDSs for them. No, all FDSs will have to be submitted electronically. So there's going to be no paper FDSs filed. Now, I know Chris would say that, as a member of your entity, organization, municipality, whatever, there's, you can let them use one of the computers, at your organization to sit down and file that if they don't have their own computer. As Chris said, I wouldn't fill out their FDS, but it doesn't, preclude you from instructing them of what to do and what fields to, to go to. They would have to fill out the information, but you can, you can direct them that way. The other way is, most people, I know we're talking about mainly probably the older community here. Ask a son, a daughter, a grandson, granddaughter, a friend to help them. It's, as you see when we get to the LGO setup and actually filing the FDS, it's not a very difficult process. It shouldn't, as long as you have the information that you need to put on the FDS readily available, it should take you no longer than, no more than 15 minutes at the most to file that, And one of the provisions that we made in the system this year is that people, if they don't have all the information when they're doing the FDS, they can come back later on without losing everything they've done up to that point, okay? And I know that was a problem with the system last year. So again, we'll go over that, but we would either recommend that you let them utilize computers within your organization, or they ask for help from somebody that they can trust. So Okay, good. So those are the questions we have so far. Let's continue on. Okay, so like I said, I did my roster in Edison Township. I'm done right now. You'll notice up at the top in my status, the LGO roster now says there's 7 people on my roster. Okay, but before we haven't filed for the new person, so it's still at 6 FDS submissions. Okay, so again, you can actually see that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log out of Edison. And what I want to do is I'm going to log in real quick into South Brunswick Township. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add James Walker on their roster as well, too, because in South Brunswick, he happens to be their Director of Building and Construction, right? So I'm now logged in as John Smith in South Brunswick Township. I'm now managing the roster for South Brunswick. I'm going to click on Add LGO, right? We're going to add our new LGO to the system, right? So I'm going to say here, this is James Walker. Right? And once I put his first name and last name in and I hit Save, now you'll notice a PIN number gets generated. Now this PIN number is different from the PIN number that was in Edison, okay? So the clerk here in South Brunswick Township will tell James, here's your PIN number for South Brunswick. And now I'm going to add in his position here, right? I'm going to say building. So I'm going to say he's the director, okay? I'm going to click on Save. And now at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that James Walker position as Director of the Building Department has been added to the system. And again, as the clerk in South Brunswick, I would give this information printed out or email this information over to James. The 3 key pieces of information that he really needs is just first name, last name, and the PIN number. Those are the important pieces in order for him to actually, register within the system. When I come back out to my roster, we'll now see that James Walker is on my roster right here. Okay. Again, no login or username listed, and there's his PIN number right there, and he hasn't filed yet. Okay. So again, that's what we have there. So let's log out. Okay. So we've gone through the process of actually creating your roster, managing your roster. A couple of things I will tell you. We do know that, this first year is probably going to be the bulk of the work because you're going to be creating your rosters from scratch. Some questions had come up about, well, what about the information of the rosters that we had from last year? Well, to be honest with you, the quality of the data wasn't to the point where anybody really felt comfortable migrating that information or getting that information over to the new system. So we're asking you to create your rosters from scratch this year. But the good thing is that going into the subsequent years, next year and the following years, that roster, whatever you created this year, is going to be copied over completely. And at that point in time next year, all you need to do is add anybody new to the roster or remove anybody from the roster that doesn't need to be there anymore. Okay? So again, the majority of the work's going to be done this year, but in subsequent years, you're basically just doing maintenance and just adding the new and deleting the people who don't apply anymore. So it should be a lot easier, as we move forward. Okay, so let's talk about an LGO. So since, again, we have the majority of the participants today are municipal clerks who have to file an FDS themselves, I'm going to show you how you set up an account, an LGO account in the system, and how you would actually file. So right on the login page, we have a link here that says New Registration, Local Government Officer, right? That person will click on that link, okay? And what they're going to be presented with today is they're going to be presented with a validation section up at the top. Now, since I've gotten 2 PIN numbers, one from Edison and one from South Brunswick, the first question that comes up is, well, which one should I use to register? It doesn't matter which PIN number you use first to register. You can use either or. You can use the Edison or the South Brunswick. Once we register the first PIN and we log into our account, we'll be able to associate the other PIN with our account once we get the account established. So it doesn't matter, with that. Another question that comes up with the filing is, should I wait to get all my PINs first and then set up my account and then file, or should I, set up the first PIN, go and file, and, when I get my other PIN, I can, set it up and file at that time? You could do both, okay? Our recommendation is that if you're part of multiple entities and you're going to have to file for different positions and different entities, wait till you get all your PINs, okay? Associate all your PINs with your account, so all your positions are there, and then you'll only have to file your FDS one time, okay? But if I, let's say, took the Edison PIN, set up my account, went in, filed my FDS, and then 2 weeks later I get the PIN from South Brunswick, well, I've already filed my first FDS. Now I have to go file it again a second time, right? Because now I have to file it for the new position from South Brunswick. So again, it's up to it's up to the LGO how they want to manage that process. Like I said, our recommendation is wait till you get all the PINs, associate them all with your account, and then just file one FDS for all positions. So you'll see that as we go through today, how that happens. So let's do this. Let's come in here. Let's associate my first PIN to my account, right? So I'm going to put in my first name. Oh, so let's do this. I'll do this for right now, and I'll put my PIN number. Here's my first PIN number, 40706. I'm going to click on Validate PIN. Oh, and guess what happens? I get a message up in top in red. It tells me my first name, last name, and PIN number do not match. Okay, that's because we put in that legal name for the first name. I put James instead of Jim. So again, that's where that match or that name becomes very important when you set it up. That you give them exactly how you set that up in the system. Now, we did have a question that came up yesterday and the day before is, what if, we'll take, for example, let's say you have an engineering firm, right, that is part of multiple towns, has contracts with multiple towns, and that person, that engineer, you're putting their name in. Does everybody have to coordinate the exact name correctly? No, they don't have to. I mean, if I put in James Walker in Edison Township and South Brunswick happens to put Jim Walker in, well, when I go to register my PIN number for South Brunswick, I have to put the first name in exactly how it was on the roster in South Brunswick. There I'm going to put Jim, okay, and I'm going to associate. It will let you do that. It's just, I'm saying, for continuity, it's always better to use the exact legal name. It just makes it a lot easier, so there is no confusion. Okay, so now I put my first name, my last name, I got my PIN. I'm going to click on Validate PIN, and wow, look at that. In green, I get a message that my PIN has been validated successfully. Now I can continue with the registration. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my information, right? So let me just come here. Okay. We'll come down to now the login section and the password section. So we're going to ask that the LGO puts in a valid email address, okay, as their login name, right? So I'm going to put in, right, we're going to ask them to confirm that. And then we ask them to put in a password as well, too, following the same guidelines that you did earlier when you went and changed your PIN number, right? So I'm going to put in my login name, confirm it. I'm going to put my password. I'm going to confirm that. We're going to ask LGO to come down. There's going to be some basically kind of definitions, terms and conditions and everything that they need to kind of read through. And then we ask them to click on the I read the definitions and instructions, and they agree to them. And then they can click on the register button here, right? So I'm going to click on register. And what they're basically going to get here is they're going to get a message in green that tells me that the registration has been successful, okay? It's going to give them their first name, their last name. It's going to give them their login and their password. They can print this out if they want, keep it for safekeeping. So when they have to do this again, whether it's the same year, next year, whatever, they can come back in here quickly and actually access the account. So now that I've registered or I set up my account, I'm actually now going to go log into my account, right? So I'm going to click on the login button. So I'm going to log in. And once I log in, you're going to see that the screen here looks a little bit similar to the screen that you originally saw when you managed the roster. You have an edit profile where they can actually go in and edit their profile and so on and so forth, right? So they can come in here and update their information, okay? They can manage their positions, and we're going to go to that in a second, or they can file their FDS, okay? So let's go to manage positions, right? Now, I got a second PIN number, right, from South Brunswick. I want to actually associate that PIN number with my account. So once the account is established in the system, those LGOs just have to go to the manage positions link, okay? And they can actually put in their other PINs, right? So I'm going to say James Walker, and my PIN number for South Brunswick was 44560. Now, if you look before I hit validate, if you look at the bottom, I only have two positions listed there, both for Edison Township, one as the council person and the other as the member. But as soon as I validate this new PIN that I was given, Now what you'll see, this PIN has been validated successfully, and at the bottom you see South Brunswick position listed there. Okay, so now I have 3 positions, 2 for Edison, 1 for South Brunswick. If I'm part of another entity, I could just go in and put that next PIN number in, okay, right? So I would clear out this field, I'd put my name in, the new PIN number that I got from the other entity, and I would associate that position with my account as well, too. So again, this is how the LGO goes in and manages all the positions that they have from various entities within the system. So one account, multiple positions. Let's go out to the home screen. Okay, so now what we see on the home screen is I see that my FDS submission says submission pending, right? So from there, what we'll do is now we can go in and we can actually file our financial disclosure statement, okay? So let me do that. Let me click on file financial disclosure statement. So I'm going to click on that link, okay? And now what it's going to do, it's going to open up information, and this is basically how the form is created. We just did, or each section of the form, the FDS form, we've actually created into 8 separate screens here, right? So the LGO is going to go through 8 separate screens here and fill out their information. So the first screen is basically pulling the information that appeared in their profile. They can add, their phone numbers if they want here, because I know I'm going to have to add my wife's information on the FDS. I'll put her name in here. You'll see the positions that I'm working with for this form, right? So these 3 positions will be included in this submission, right? So we see them all listed below. Now what we could do is we could do one or 2 things. We can either click on the Save button at the bottom, or we can click on Next. Now, if I click on Next, it actually does save and go to the next screen. But if I just click on the Save button, what it does is it tells me that my information has been saved successfully, but it keeps me on the screen that I'm working on, right? So if I wanted to come back later on and finish this, I haven't lost what I've done yet. I can always pick up where I left off. But let's go on to the next screen. So let's go to the next screen. Here we're going to list all sources of income, right? So here we say, okay, you know what? I'm the director in South Brunswick, right? So I'm going to put South Brunswick Township in here as income source, right? Okay, and that's self. We normally default to self. I'm going to say that's the income for myself, right? So I'm going to hit Save. Still working on the screen. I'm now going to list sources of income now for my spouse, okay? Right, and I'll say this is my spouse, and I'll click on Save. And as I'm adding the sources of income, you'll notice down at the bottom, my list of entries is being created here, right? And I can keep adding all my different sources of income, right? I can just keep putting it down there, right? Right? I'm going to say, right? And that's for myself. And again, I can keep just going down and adding as many sources of income that I have, and I can list them there. At this point in time, I can click on Next, right? Go to the next screen. It's now going to ask me to list any sources of fees or honorariums that I got. Well, I don't get any of those, right? So I'm just going to click on Next, and oh, look what happened. I got a message. It says, to proceed, at least one entry should be added or select none. The system is not going to let you go to the next screen unless you add some entries here, some sources, or you click on the none box here. Well, since I didn't have any fees or honorariums, what I'm going to do is just click on none. And now at this point in time, I can click Next. It'll let me go to the next screen. So again, they can't go to that next screen unless they either click on the none box or they add their fees. Again, here, sources of gifts, reimbursement of prepaid expenses in excess of $400. I didn't have any of those, so I'll click none. We'll come to the next screen, which is information for any business organizations that an interest is held, right? So I'm going to put here that I have a part interest in the bagel shop. All right, so that's me. So I'm going to list that down and click Save. So that's the interest that I have there. Right now I can go to Next. And now we're on the property screen here, right? So we have to list our real property that we have in New Jersey, right? So I'll list, okay, I live in Edison, so what I'll do is I'll come down here and I'll add my Edison information in. And I'm going to say me and my wife own this house, so I'm going to say 50% is owned by me, and I'm going to say that my wife owns the other 50%. I know this was a problem on the form last year, that it was hard for people to actually split percentages. But as you can see here, for anything, if there's a percentage difference, that can actually be listed. So it's 50% for myself, 50% for my spouse. Okay. So again, you can do that on this screen. And as I'm going through this FDS, at any point in time, if I want to view the form, okay, that I've already started or the information I've already added, I can click on this preview FDS form right here. And what that'll do is, this is one of those pop-ups that come up, and it's also a PDF. What that'll do is that'll open up the form, and all the information that you've completed so far will be listed on that form, right? So we'll let this come up so you can take a quick peek at the form real quick. Just bear with me here. Here we go. Okay, right. So this is the FDS form, and you'll see the entries that I've already made on the form here. Here are my positions. Here are my sources of income. Here's the interest that I held. Here's the property I own, right? So that's all listed on this form. So at any point in time, I can actually look at that form, how it's being completed so far, okay? I can now click on next. I'll go to the next screen, right? Any comments? I'll say this is a test FDS form. Right. I'll click on next, and that will take me to the last screen. Now, on this screen, this is the final screen. This is step 8 of 8. This is where they're actually going to submit this form. Now, one of the things I want to point out real quick, I'll just show you down here. I'll circle it. You'll notice that my Submit Financial Disclosure button at the bottom here is grayed out, okay? I cannot submit this form until two things occur on this screen. If they haven't already previewed their FDS form, we're going to force them to take a look at their form, okay? They're going to have to click on this Review Financial Disclosure form first before they file, right? So they'll click on that. It'll open up the form. They'll view it, right? So we're forcing them to view the form. And then the last thing we make them do before they submit is they need to type their name in, which basically becomes their electronic signature, right? So here I type in the name James Walker. This is going to be my electronic signature. So once I review that form, once I type in my name, then at this point in time I can now click on Submit Financial Disclosure. So let's do that. And then we get a message that comes up, and it says here, are you sure you want to submit this form today? And the reason why it's coming up is because once this form is submitted, they can't amend it, supplement it, modify it, change it whatsoever. Okay, once it's submitted, it's submitted. There's no longer a way for them to go back and actually change that form. So we're letting them know, we're giving them that warning that once it's submitted, no changes can be made after that. I'm fine with the form. I double-checked it, triple-checked it, did all my checks on it. I'm good with it. I'm going to click on OK. And then what's going to happen is they're going to get a message up in top in green. It's going to give them a confirmation ID. It's going to tell them this is the date and time that they submitted it. And at this point in time, they can actually print this out, the screen out, so they have a confirmation. They can view the FDS form, okay? And now we know this has been submitted because as soon as it's submitted, what we do is we put the date and their name on the bottom of the form. So we know this is a submitted form, right? And they have this information here. So they can just click on print, and they can actually print out that confirmation. So now they're done. They've submitted these 3 positions, right? I don't have any other positions that I belong to, right? My status up at the top says FDS submission is now submitted. You'll notice that under the financial disclosure statement icon, I can't click on that. It does not allow me to do any other financial disclosure statements because for all the positions that I've had, I've submitted that FDS. Now, let's say 2 months from now, I get assigned to a new board in a particular town. It could be the town I work in. It could be Edison, South Brunswick. It could be the county. Well, at that point in time, I will be put on that person's roster. Once I'm put on that roster, I should be issued a PIN number for that person's roster. At that point in time, I would take that PIN number, come back into the system, log in under my account, go to Manage Positions, and now associate that new PIN number that was just given to me with my account. Once I do that, then this becomes enabled, and now I can file that financial disclosure statement with the new position. Now, a couple things happen there. Number one, the information that was submitted before previous, we retain in the system. So for the user, they don't have to retype everything back in. All they need to do is review and modify the information that's already in the system. If nothing has changed, they can just go through basically every screen and hit submit at the end, and now that FDS for that new position will be submitted. Okay? If anything has changed, they can obviously make changes for it. But please remember, if I'm submitting in the year 2014, the information that goes on that FDS relates to the previous year, to 2013, right? So really, there shouldn't be, I don't think, any major changes unless they forgot something or they added something that maybe should have been on there. But for the most part, that form should be the same that was submitted, prior, within the system. So, a couple of last things. I'm going to just show you one last thing, and then we'll take the remainder of the questions. So, once that FDS is submitted, I'm going to go to the public work search site here. Okay, this is where the public's going to come and actually be able to search and view any FDSs that have been submitted for your organization. Now, as a public user, I can search two ways. I can either search by an entity, right? So let's say I want to look for all FDSs that are in Edison Township, right? Well, actually, let me come back to that. I'll do that second because I want to just show you a couple things of that. But let's say I'm looking for a particular person. Let's say I'm looking for James Walker, right? So I put in Walker as the last name. I hit search. And then what happens is I get, oh, look at that, 3 entries come up for James Walker. I see that there's an FDS file for Edison Township as a council person, as a planning and zoning board member, and also I see one for South Brunswick for the director of the building department. As the public user, I can just click on the view button, okay, and what that'll do is that'll open up that FDS, and I can view that FDS right there on the screen, okay, that was filed, okay. So since James Walker is the same person, I can view all of them are going to be the same. If he submitted a different one on a different date, okay, then I can look at that one, obviously, because it's a different submission. But these 3 were all submitted on the same day. So that's one way to actually pull up an individual person. But let's say I want to look for all FDSs that were filed for Edison Township. Well, if I put that entity in and hit search, what we'll see now is we'll see all the different FDSs for all the different people come up in the system. Now, I can go in and view them each individually, or what we're providing here in the system is a way for them to actually download them, right? So if they select them all here on the left, I can come in here. I have to put in this captcha phrase at the bottom, right? But once I put in that captcha phrase and I hit download, the system will allow me to download all those FDSs that were selected, right? So I can get a PDF of everybody's FDS in one shot, okay, without having to individually open each one up and save it or print it out. I can get the complete download. But for viewing, they don't have to enter in this captcha. They can just click on the view link. It's only when they want to download multiple, we're forcing them to actually go in and put in that, what we call that captcha phrase. And then the last thing that happens is that, as soon as that user files their FDS, let me log back in as a LGE in Edison Township. As soon as that LGO files their financial disclosure statement, immediately, besides the public site, being updated immediately and that FDS being searchable, on your roster, that flag that we showed or that column that we showed FDS files earlier, that now gets updated as well too. Okay, so if I go back to the roster and we look at James Walker, you'll see now that FDS file now says yes. Okay, so as soon as that LGO files, the system gets updated automatically. Your roster gets updated automatically. Now, we're not saying that you have to go in and you have to babysit your LGOs and force them to submit. It's their responsibility, but you can always see who has submitted and who hasn't submitted. Okay, by just looking at your roster, in that column, that FDS file. And you could sort this as well too. By clicking on the link, I can sort everybody, all the no's, and then put all the yeses together, right? Because it might be, throughout your roster, there's some no's, some yeses. So if you just click on that field, it'll group all the no's together, and then you can kind of see, who hasn't, filed yet within your organization. But again, immediately, that information comes up. So I know we covered a lot. I'm going to pause there for a second. I think Chris is going to give the third keyword, and then we're going to go through everybody's questions that they've had, and we'll try to answer all those questions, because I know there's probably a bunch of them.
All right, the third code word for you guys to write down is Mongolia. M-O-N-G-O-L-I-A. Mongolia. M-O-N-G-O-L-I-A. Mongolia. Again, computer generated. I didn't make it up.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so let's go through some of the questions. So the first question I've come up, it says, if the LGO's name is misspelled when the roster is created, may the LGO edit it when they register, or must they be done by the LGE? No, when the LGO registers, they will have the ability to go into their profile and update their name. Again, you know, we're only using that first name, last name, and that PIN number to do the initial validation within the system. But once they go in and they create their account and they update their profile information, if something was misspelled incorrectly, it's going to update the information. Just like if you could see now in the roster, we now have the login name populated for James Walker. So once James registered in the system and filed, this information got updated in the system. So again, you know, we know that there could be misspellings, but you know, we ask that you try to get them correct right up front. Next question, if someone works in more than one town, can they link to one FDS, or will they have to fill out the same form twice? Again, it depends when they get their PIN numbers, okay? If they get their PIN numbers relatively close together, or they just wait till they get all their PIN numbers, then they'll be able to file one FDS for all entities and all positions, and no matter which organization they belong to. But if I had gone in and just put my Edison PIN number in and filed, and 2 weeks later I came in and put in my South Brunswick PIN number, I would have to refile again, because that South Brunswick position wasn't on the original FDS that I filed. It would only be the 2 Edison positions. So again, if you know your LGOs belong to multiple organizations or entities, you might just want to, you know, tell them, you know, wait till you get all your PIN numbers, and then at that point in time, once you register all your PIN numbers, then file your FDS, because you only have to file one time. Okay? Next question, what if we don't know the position that the person has?
I'm not sure how that would be possible. So maybe the person that asked that question could give an example.
Okay.
I mean, quite frankly, if you don't know what position that person has, how is that person even showing up on your roster, I guess is my question.
Okay. Yeah, so if you can answer that question, or, you know, rephrase it, we'll try to answer it. Okay, next question. Must everyone have a unique email address, or can they use the clerk's email address if they don't wish to share the personal email address? No, everybody has to have a unique email address, okay? Even the clerks will have to use a different email address when they go to file their FDS as an LGO. They will not be able to use their clerk email or the email that was given to them for the roster management. Okay, so whatever email address you have for the roster management, then what will happen is, you know, you will have to use a different email address in order to file your FDS, whether it's your personal email address, or again, we've told other people who said, you know, there's some, you know, members that don't have email addresses. There are sites out there that you can get a free email from. Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook.com, they all provide free email addresses. Or you can ask your IT department, you know, if they can provide an email address for those members, you know, an official, you know, let's say township email address, then you might want to go that route as well too. But you have to have that separate email address filed. You can't share. Now you could share the roster management email with a couple people. So if you have a couple people who manage your roster within your town, you can obviously share that username and that password with them to manage the roster, but the file, you'll need a separate email address. Barbara, I see you wrote a message that your phone went dead or the audio went dead. I don't know if that was on your side, but I'm not sure if you were able to reestablish your phone connection or not, if you're still on. Okay, what if on Social Security? Okay, Social Security is a source of income, okay? So if a person is on Social Security and that's their source of income, it needs to be listed. A question came up yesterday, husband and wife both get Social Security, right? Those would be listed twice on the FDS if it's two separate checks or two sources of income. If the wife's getting her own source and the husband's getting his own check, they are two separate sources of income, so they need to be listed separately on the FDS form. After this training webinar, will we also receive a local finance notice with written instructions? Good question. Okay, so what we're going to do is when the system goes live, and we're anticipating within the next 7 to 10 days for the system to go live, there will be information out on the live site, both from an instruction standpoint and also contact information standpoint. We are going to be putting these videos that we've done over the last couple of days also up online somewhere. We don't know yet exactly where they're going to be hosted, but as soon as they're available, you'll be able to go back and review these training videos that we did or these sessions that we did. So again, those will all be there that you can go back and actually take a look and go over what we've done today. Next question, will the LGOs receive training on how to fill out their forms, or will there be a help menu? We are planning on, I'm going to be working on a training video for the LGOs that will be on the live site. There'll be an instruction, like a quick instruction sheet, but the training video will basically kind of go over the steps that I did when we went and filed as an LGO. It's going to be short. We're probably looking at 3 to 5 minutes at the most. Quick, easy. They can run the video and get instructions on how to file. So again, once the site goes live, that information or that section should be up there. Okay, does copy get filed with the municipal clerk when filed? The answer is no. The LGO does not have to give you a receipt, does not have to give you a copy of the financial disclosure statement. If somebody comes in with an OPRA request, you direct them out to the public site, okay? You don't need to provide that, through OPRA. You can just instruct the public to go out to the public site, and the public will be able to view all FDSs that have been filed, okay? So, again, you don't need to physically get a paper copy of that FDS and maintain that physical copy. Next question, when the LGO registers includes an email, will the LGE have to access that email address? No, there's no reason for you to have to access the LGO's email address, okay?
And remember, I want to add this. The email address is really a username at that point, a login or a username. It's really, we're requiring it to be an email address, but it's not an email address in the sense that you need it to communicate to them or we need it to communicate with them.
Correct. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, as Chris had said, we're not storing it as a field for communication or reference. It is, and if you look on this roster screen, it says it's their login name. Okay, even though it's their email address, it's their login or name, which falls under security and credentials. Where obviously, we don't believe that's something that can be obtained through OPRA or anything like that. So it's like if you were using your email address to log into your bank account, right? Or, example, right? Let's say you're in a township and you use your email address to log into the township bank account. Well, somebody can't come in and ask me what that email address is for that, for that account, right? It's the same thing, basically. Okay, next question. What if a commissioner has a change of job, additional job, real estate interest, business ownership after the FDS is filed? Do they wait until next year to file this information? Again, the information that they're filing for in 2014 relates to everything in 2013, not current year, not 2014. So just like you file your taxes for the previous year, you're filing your FDS for information from the previous year. Now, obviously, if they forgot to include stuff on that FDS, well, at that point in time, they're stuck. There's nothing they can do once it's filed. That's why we give them that warning message at the end that no changes can be made once it's filed. Okay. So, I hope that answers that question for you, Rick. Okay, next question. Does the RMC need to keep a hard copy of the FDS on file? I already answered that one. The answer is no. Is it a timeshare in New Jersey for which you pay taxes be listed as property owned? Don't know. Chris, good question.
Don't know the answer to that. Nobody's, to my knowledge, has asked that before. Real property, has a legal connotation of typically real estate. timeshare is probably personal property, but I'll get I'll discuss that with Patty McNamara, the Executive Secretary of the Board, and we'll include an answer to that either in an FAQ or the local finance notice.
Okay, good. Good question. Okay, next question. Has a deadline been established for roster submission, deadline date for submission at FDS? Okay, as of right now, the deadline has been pushed back to May 15th for the LGOs to file their financial disclosure statements, but that date is fluid right now until the system goes live. At the time that a go-live date has been established, more than likely that date will get adjusted somewhat, but as of today, the date is May 15th. That's the official date as of today. But, you know, look out for notices. Most likely, like I said, after the system goes live, that date will probably be adjusted accordingly. Okay, next question. If someone has technical issues, is there a help desk number or email address for them to contact? Once the system goes live on the live site, there will be information on who to contact if you're having problems. There will be people at the DTA that will be fielding questions more around policy and so on and so forth. If they're technical questions, Sunrise will be involved, but most likely through the DTA. They'll take the initial question and then we'll probably be referred over. But we haven't worked out all those details yet. But once the system goes live, the information will be up on the website for you to know who to contact when you're having issues. Disregard email question. I see it listed. Okay. What is the filing date for this year? I just mentioned that. Okay. Next question. I am a deputy township clerk, and last year I entered the FDS from the paper ones onto the computer. I'm a little confused. Do I enter them, or do the LGOs enter their own, and I am responsible for just creating the roster? You are just responsible for creating the roster, okay? Once you create the roster, you will give that first name, last name, and PIN number to the LGO, and then they're responsible for entering the FDSs, or they're filing their FDSs. It's not your responsibility to file their FDS, okay? You're just creating the roster and maintaining the roster. That's it. Okay, next question. Do court personnel have to file? Again, there's notices out there. I will refer you out to the DCA site of who has to file. So whoever manages your roster, I know Chris will say, for the people who manage your roster, the clerks or whoever, get with your counsel and determine who has to file and who doesn't have to file. Just don't put everybody down on the roster, especially if they don't have to file. I mean, it's going to create more work for you. It's going to create more work for the DCA. It's going to confuse the public as well, too. So, again, you really need to just, kind of get with your legal counsel and look at the information or documentation from the state. I think it's under the state ethics code policy or statute or whatever, who has to file and who doesn't have to file. But, I mean, that's a good start, place to start.
Take a look at last year's take a look at last year's local finance notice. In the meantime, there are some court positions that are addressed in there, and there's also a link to some attorney general opinions that were rendered way back when.
Okay. A couple of repeat questions, but I'll just answer them again. Again, will the LGOs? Will you have to create instructions for the LGOs? No, we will have instructions for them on how to file out on the website. Question, it says, this is going to be difficult for elderly volunteers. You admitted that you had to file your fathers. Many of our volunteers will have a difficult time with the system, and this will be a burden on office staff to assist with entering. This presentation is over an hour, and if we need to assist volunteers, this takes a lot of time. Granted, Elizabeth, we covered a lot of stuff today. Typically, what we recommend is that those elderly volunteers get some help from somebody. Again, a family member. We don't want to put the burden on you. That's why we will put a video out there. And again, there are going to be some people who just really have a hard time doing this, but we ask them to seek. The first place to go would be their family to help them, and not really burdening you and your staff. So just keep that in mind. We're going to try to make this as easy as possible, but again, for continuity and everything, it's really going to help everybody out overall throughout the state. So, okay. it says, I started at 11. Will this session be repeated? There are other sessions. There's one this afternoon, and there's a couple, 2 next week and 1 the following week. I think on the original email that was sent out from the BTA, all the different sessions were listed on there. If you don't have that information, you can, I will give you my email address. You can email me, and I can send you the dates that are coming up. So I'll do that right now. What is the public site? We don't have that listed yet. We are working with the state OIT in getting a friendly URL name. But once we have that established, that will be communicated to you of what the site is. It will probably also be up on the DCA site as well, too, for people to access. But we haven't established that public site yet. We're still working on that right now. I talked about the deadline to file, May 15th as of right now, but subject to change. It says, what if the LGO refuses to file? Chris, you like answering that one.
Well, for starters, that's not anybody's problem except for the LGO. The LGO makes that decision, and the LGO determines whether or not they want to run the risk of the embarrassment that inevitably will occur when a newspaper reporter or a gadfly either writes a newspaper article or the gadfly files an ethics complaint. And actually, the refusal, especially if it's intentional, will certainly not be helpful when that LGO is brought before the local finance board for an explanation as to why they did not file. I think in many respects the local finance board is forgiving of inadvertence and things that are not intentional, but an outright refusal or just ignorance of wanting to do this is certainly not something that's going to help a person. Ethics complaints revolving around financial disclosure statements are the #1 type of ethics complaint that the board gets, and the board gets many, hundreds, in fact, of ethics complaints that arise out of either not filing or filing and not including all of the information that's supposed to be included. But again, at the end of the day, it's not our problem that they don't file. It's not your problem that they don't file. You never have to look. If you never bother looking at your roster once it's created to see who filed or who didn't file, that's up to you. If you're curious, you can look, and if you're even more want to be even more helpful, you want to look and see who didn't file and give them a little friendly reminder. That's all up to you. It's just a matter of trying to internally set a policy that your office can live by based on other competing interests that you have in your office. You only have a certain number of hours in the day, so.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Next question, is the site available now to start confirming roster? No, not yet. Most likely within the next 7 to 10 days, the site's going to be live, and as soon as we have a go-live date, you will be communicated with that information. So as of today, no, the site is not available yet. Next question, will email address be made public information? As of this time, we don't believe so. The email address is really just the username. It's more of a credential for security, so it's not more of a communication type. We're not utilizing for communication. It's utilized as their username. So really, we don't believe it's something that somebody can come in with an open request and request that information. Next question. Okay, so this is a good question. What if your email has nothing to do with your name, such as John Smith, but his email is woody@gmail.com? Does it have to have the legal name in it? No, does not have to. Again, the email is just as a we're utilizing that as a username, so everybody has a unique username in the system. So no, it doesn't matter. Their name does not have to be in their email address. Must the LGO list all children as dependents and record their income? Is there an age limit to register them? Again, I don't know the answer. Chris, if you want to answer that, where they would go to get that information.
Can you repeat that for me?
Sure. Must the LGO list all children as dependents and record their incomes? Is there an age limit to register them?
Hold on a second. Let me go on to another question if you got one.
Yeah, okay, no problem. We'll move on. Okay. I just answered the question of when the system's going to go live. Okay, next question. Will we be notified when the system goes live, or should I check periodically? No. You will get a notice from the DCA when the system is going to go live. You're going to get your credentials, and you'll get a URL and all that, just prior to the system going live. Once a deadline is established, can someone file after that date? Yes, okay? But we date and timestamp of exactly when they get filed. So if they file after the deadline, they, take the risk of, an ethics complaint being filed against them because they didn't file on time. But absolutely, the system will accept filings, through the, rest of the year. I mean, we don't physically stop people from filing, but we do date and timestamp of when they've actually filed that FDS in the system. So that information will be listed, on the site.
Getting back to that other question, the FDS form does not require that a local government officer name children solely for the purpose of us collecting information about the children. The spouse, if there is a spouse or domestic partner, civil union partner, etc., that's required on the form regardless of whether any other part of the form applies to the spouse. Where the dependent comes into play is if just say hypothetically that there's a dependent, a child whose name is on a deed to a piece of property or something of that sort. The dependent's name is being listed, but only because that's the response to the question. Because the questions typically say that you have to provide a response that applies to you or a member of your immediate family. So if you have a child that has an interest in a business organization for whatever reason, I don't know why a 14-year-old would, but if that was the case, you would be listing the child for the purpose of responding to that financial information question or any other applicable question. But you're not listing children for the sake of listing children. It's not required on the form anywhere.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Okay, next question. Is there a hard and fast line of those positions that need to file an FDS? Again, I will direct you out to, I know, Lori, if you're still on the line here, as a municipal clerk, I know out on the municipal clerk site, there is under the desk reference section, there is some information, but there's I haven't seen a physical hard list of positions. It basically kind of gives an overview of who's responsible, for filing. So either the DCA, there's information on the DCA site, and also on the municipal clerk site in the desk reference section under the ethics code, you can actually see, what positions have to actually file. So
again, start with last year's local finance notice. Some of this is addressed there. So there are some positions that are very clearly going to apply in every town. Elected officials, for instance, that's the lowest hanging fruit. Anybody that's elected should be filing these things. It's that simple. Your planning board, your zoning board, your environmental commission, etc. Low hanging fruit. I think the most difficulty all of us have in trying to determine who files is when you get into the managerial executive and the confidential employee section. You're going to need to catch up and try to hammer some of this out with either your municipal attorney or your labor attorney, because the standard that applies comes out of labor law. That's how this was set up many years ago. It's not easy. It's very difficult at times trying to figure this out. But I just want to say one thing: don't lose sleep over it. Do the best you can. Make sure you've got the most obvious positions covered. Reach out to your labor attorney, municipal attorney for some help. If you don't get the help, document that you asked for the help, and just don't lose sleep over it. Don't sweep people into this that don't need to be on the roster. That's not the solution we want you to go with. We prefer that you reach out and try to get help, and document that you reached out to try to get help. That way, if there is an ethics complaint down the road that somebody didn't file and they weren't on your roster, at least you have a documentation that you tried to get help. That, we feel, is a better approach than putting every principal clerk typist, every human resources clerical typist, police records clerks. I mean, none of those people really belong on that roster. And when you start putting those people on your roster, you're making those people that aren't local government officers fill out a form that does have personal information on it. That wasn't the trade-off when they accepted public employment. Local government officers, on the other hand, accept as a trade-off of being an LGO the requirement that they file these. It's that simple. If they don't want to file one of these, the solution is resign and no longer be a local government officer.
Thanks, Chris. And I think that statement you just made actually answers a couple of questions coming up, too. So one is, do court personnel need to file? Again, going back to what Chris said, you need to go back and look at, what's been done in the past and the references that are out there right now. And then, Terry, you said, what if they refuse to file? Again, it's incumbent on themselves. I mean, they run that risk of, as Chris said, ending up in the newspaper somewhere, or, or an ethics, violation being lodged against them, and so on and so forth. So you can't force them to file. I mean, it's their responsibility. So, you just put them on the roster, and, you're pretty much done at that point in time. Next question, it says, for future releases of the system, please consider an option where the PIN number is emailed directly to the LGO once generated by the system. Denise, one of the reasons why we're not doing that, just so you're aware, is that would force you to obtain the email address of that individual, which then becomes a field that we think would be something that can be OPRA'd, because you're now maintaining an email address of individuals within the system. So what we could maybe look at in the future is not storing the email address in the system, but maybe instead of giving you a print button at the bottom where you can print it out, maybe giving you a button where you can attach a copy of that screen or that printout to your Outlook, and then from there you could just email it to the individual. But again, I would caution obtaining email addresses and storing them in the system, just because then I think it might open it up to OPRA, and I don't know if you want to kind of have to worry about that whole, process as well too. So I would probably just shy away from that. But we can take a look at, like I said, just attaching the print screen, or what we're doing as a printout, and just attaching as an attachment to an email in your Outlook, and then you could just email it from your Outlook or something like that. That might work better. Good question. I know I didn't really touch on it, but somebody pointed out. It says, what is the active column on the roster? There are some checked and some not. As I mentioned, going into next year, we're going to take the current roster from this year and we're going to copy it over for next year, so you have a starting point. At that point in time, you would actually go into the individuals that are no longer part of the organization, and you would actually disable them or make them inactive. So the ones, we've made a couple of people here inactive already, so that's why you don't see checks in the active column. So again, that will be for future kind of training when we get into next year, but that's basically what that column is basically disabling a person that was on your previous roster. So going into the next year, they're not an active member of the new roster for 2015. If an FDS is based on the previous year, does an FDS have to be filed the following year if the individual is no longer holding the position or is no longer associated with the township? No, basically the years that the individual is associated with the township, those are the years they need to file, okay? But the information that they're filing is information from the previous year. So if they're associated with your organization just in, let's say, the year 2014, the FDS that they submit is going to relate to information for 2013. It's like your income tax, okay? If next year in 2015 you're no longer part of your organization, they don't have to file anything, right? They're not part of your organization in 2015, so they don't have to file at that point in time. And then last question, it says, is there a second code for clerk and CFO to upload for credits? Again, you would have to talk to Chris on that. So,
can you repeat that, Mark?
It says, is there a second code for the clerk and the CFO to upload for credits?
We've already given the codes, just so everybody knows. We've given all 3 codes already today.
Yeah. So
there was a second. You would have had to be logged in and on and watching the presentation at that point in time.
So, okay. Well, we've come to. I know we've run over quite a bit, and I apologize for the little problem we had earlier on. But we've gone through all the questions that we've had. Myself and Chris will stay on for a couple more minutes. But if anybody else has any last-minute questions, feel free to ask them, before we log off here. Like I said, we are recording these sessions. We are going to be putting them up somewhere. We don't know exactly just yet, but at some point in time, you can actually go back and go through not just your session that you attended today, but if you want to go through one of the other ones, there have been different questions that have come up in some of the other ones as well too. So if you want to especially go through the responses to the questions, feel free to listen to the other ones once we get them up and running as well too. I'll say I want to thank everybody for joining today. We're excited. I believe the people at the DCA are excited. I think, from my overview, from doing this is the first time that I'm actually working with FDSs and all that, but, I've looked at some previous submissions from towns. This is going to make it more consistent for everybody, both for the public, and I think it's also going to be better for you to manage the process as well, too. So we're very happy with what's here, and we've gotten the responses that we've gotten so far. Everybody seems to think it's going to be a lot easier to utilize the system this year than in previous years. So again, thank you. So like I said, I see a couple of other questions coming in here real quick. Let me take a look. What are we to do with the 3 codes if there's a course number for credit? Okay, so the 3 codes is you're going to fill out your form for CEUs and submit that to, I believe, Dan Kaminsky at DCA. There's a section on there to list the 3 codes because that's what they're going to use for validation in order to give you credit. Am I correct, Chris?
Yeah, it's called the Individual Continuing Education Agreement. It's on our website. And in Part 2 of that form, it's just a one-page form. In Part 2, just make sure you include the 3 code words. That's all.
Okay. Chris, in response to that question that came up about the codes, it says now, is there a separate code, not a second code for the CFOs for the seminar? No. They would use the same codes.
Well, we've only approved this at this point for municipal clerks. You can fill, if there's a CFO on the line watching this program, you can certainly fill out the same agreement and send it in to Dan Kaminsky. I can't guarantee he will approve it because this is for records, because this is really a clerk's function, but you can try.
Okay. Yeah, and the next question relating again to credits as well too. It says we have a group taking this webinar. Are we all able to receive credit? As Chris has said, it has been approved for the clerk for records management credit. So if you have multiple people who that applies to, then yes, you can all submit for that credit utilizing the information. Next question. If you have an LGO who is also a member of the county authority, do I have any responsibility in regard to the authority PIN? The county authorities are going to be managed by the counties, correct, Chris? Yeah. So no. The question is no. The LGO will have to get that PIN from the county authority. You're going to only be responsible for the PIN for your organization and giving that PIN for your organization to the LGO. If the LGO is associated with any other organization or entity, they need to get the PINs from that organization or entity. It's not your responsibility to get them for that LGO. Let's see here. Thank you. It says, since the time ran over, will we get more than 1 CEU? Unfortunately, no. It's just been approved for just 1 CEU at this point in time. If you took the financial disclosure and the best practice class at the clerk's conference in March with the CEUs will this still count?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay. And if an LGO is retired either 2013 or 2014, are they responsible to file? Again, they only are responsible to file if they were, I believe, part of the organization in 2014. Correct, Chris?
Yeah, they'd have to be on your 2014 roster as currently being local government officers. If they retired December 31st, 2013, they're not going to fill out an FDS in 2014. And part of the reason for that is practical. You have no way to. You may not have any way of communicating with those people. They might be long gone into happy retirement, wherever they may be. So it's really just the people that are in your organization when you're creating your roster.
Okay. Chris, I have a question that came up here, which I think is a pretty good question, and I think the way it was worded, I think I understand what it says. It says if a township attorney has a number of attorneys, who would file the FDS for the municipality? So I'm thinking if there's a firm that has multiple attorneys, who's responsible for filing that FDS? Is it all the attorneys or just the partner? Or?
I've actually seen I've actually seen it done different ways, and part of the answer depends on how the appointment is made. Generally speaking, you should be appointing a person as your municipal attorney, and I've seen other towns appoint a person and the law firm and its attorneys, in which case everybody that does work for that, on the municipal side of things will fill one out. I'm not sure that it's addressed anywhere in our local finance notices in the past. I can tell you I've seen it done different ways for different towns, but I'm making a note with that, so we'll address that in the local finance notice as well.
Okay, good. Very good question, Anne-Marie. Next question, will you be providing a written FAQ document with the answers to all the questions you have addressed here? I don't believe so. That's why we said we are recording the webinars. We are going to put them up. Over the last couple of days, this is the 5th one we did. There's been a lot of questions that have been answered. We will try on some of the common questions, revolving around deadline and stuff like that. Those, I think, will be kind of addressed in the notices that come out. But to actually go through every single question and come up with a response, there's been literally hundreds and hundreds of questions. So I don't think at this point in time we would do that. We would just refer you back to the webinars and just kind of review them again. Okay, I think we've gotten to all the questions that we've had so far. Again, I know we've definitely run over a lot here, but a lot of good questions have come up. Again, I want to thank everybody who attended today. I want to thank Chris for being on and answering questions as well too. Again, once the system goes live, there'll be contact information on there. So if any other questions come up, please refer to that information, refer to the documentation that's there in the system. and hopefully it's not that hard for you to utilize the system. I think there's going to be a small learning curve, but once it's done, I think you'll get a good grasp of the system, and you'll be fine after you get it going. So again, thank you. I will stay on for about 2 more minutes here, and we'll be ending this webinar for today. So thanks again, everybody. Okay, Chris, I don't think any other questions are coming now. Most of the people have left, so
all right.
I think we're good. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Bye.